Okay, now we talk about tools. It's a reasonably expensive hobby, quilting, patchwork and quilting, but if you buy good quality tools now, they should last you a long time. We start off with a self-healing rotary cutting mat, and I would recommend nothing smaller than a 24 by 36. You pretty much will need that full size. If you're working in a reasonably small area, you can get a smaller mat like this. It's probably about 17 by 11. It's not recommended. It's just too small to work with. Then we have our rulers here. There's hundreds of different types of rulers. These ones that I have here are exclusively New Zealand made, but I'm sure you can get others from other parts. I tend to prefer a 6.5 by 24 inch ruler for most of my work, and I do prefer the ones that have lots of lines going in one direction. They're easier to read. So if you can get one like that, it's definitely preferable than one. A lot of them have lines going everywhere and they're really hard as a beginner to sort of read them. This is just a smaller version. This is a 4 by 16 ruler, exactly the same but just a smaller. If you're just using a lot of fat quarters, and which I'll talk about soon, this ruler is probably just as good, although I do prefer to have a 6 to 6.5 width. This is a square, and a good one to start with if you're going to be doing piecing is definitely an 8 by 8. Square is really good, and again this is a New Zealand made one, and you'll see that most of the lines go in one direction. There's not too many confusing, and they are consistently drawn lines. They're not dotted or just dashes, which some rulers are. When I mention about rulers, about not too many lines, what I'm referring to is these diagonal lines. These lines here, these long consistent drawn on lines are great. You'll see that every 1/4 inch is marked and every 1/8 has got a dash on it. This is the kind of ruler I prefer to use. And this one here, whilst it's okay, you'll see that every inch is marked with a solid line, but in between these is a line of dashes, and what happens with that is you have to line up the edge of your fabric with those dashes, so it's not so quick and easy to line up with as what it is with a solid line. We come to rotary cutters. There's various types. As you may be able to tell, I use alpha mats, and these are alpha cutters. They are not pricey, but they're not bottom of the line. They're a good price. If you're just wanting to buy one, and most quilt shops should have sets of mat, ruler and cutter at a discounted rate rather than buying them all individually, I would recommend a 45mm cutter, which is this one. This one is ergonomic. So, and it also has a locking mechanism in it. There are a lot of cutters around like this one where you push the blade back, the cover back, and it reveals the blade. They're quite dangerous. This one here, if you are not squeezing the trigger, the blade is covered, so you're not cut. These are extremely sharp. Don't go anywhere near your fingers with them. Honestly, it will chop your finger right off. And this one here, when you squeeze it, it pushes the blade out and it's ready for cutting. You can actually lock it so it can't be squeezed, or you can lock it so it's on, fully on. I don't ever have it locked on. I always use it like this. So squeeze it and the blade is in. Then I'm going back to the cutters again. You get spare blades for the cutters, and any quilt shop will show you how to change those if you're not sure. Pins, I use flower head pins, which are these little pins with the flowery head, and they have a long shaft on them. They're really good. Or if you don't like the idea of these flower head pins, you can get these pins here with, but make sure you get a glass head on them, because you can iron them. A lot of the plastic ones you can't iron, they melt, but the glass headed pins you can iron over, so that's all good. You will also need thread. If you're piecing and you do want to do a whole quilt top. Every one of my quilt tops I have pieced with a neutral thread, that is, it's neither too dark nor too light, it's kind of in the middle and you can't see it. So you can get quite a fat spool and use it on most, that colour can be used on most things. I probably wouldn't use it on anything really pale, but it can be used on most tops. Talking of thread, I tend to mainly use the Metricine Metler threads. The bonitas are calibrated for this thread. It's a very good quality thread, and it's just easy to use. It's strong. Steer away from inexpensive cheap threads. They aren't consistently smooth, they're hard on your machine, and it just doesn't produce a good end product. Basically with patchwork and quilting, you get what you pay for, and if you use good quality you will end up with a good quality result. If you're going to be doing applique, which I would recommend for a beginner, applique is probably the easiest and quickest method to use. You will need a Teflon mat. This is, you put it on your ironing board and or between your fabric and your iron, and you use this. When you're using what we call Vlisifix or Wonder Under, it's really sticky, and if you get it on your iron it is really gunky. So this protects your iron. You can also use baking paper that you use in your oven. Baking paper is really good. Don't get the cheap home brand, get Glad or Mono. Those ones are all good. And then you have the Vlisifix or Wonder Under, which is like greaseproof on one side, and on the other side it is kind of sticky webbing. It's like a webbing of glue that's heat set. So there you go, it looks like this. Okay, now you'll also need, if you don't want to, there's different basting methods when you're quilting up your sandwich. If you don't want to spray base, which is like a sticky spray, I don't personally use it myself, but a lot of people do, you sandwich your 3 layers together with pins, and these are the pins I prefer to use. They are bent pins and they're easier to use than the straight ones, and they're not too big. So that's what I would use. A lot of people now use spray basting, and you can now also get iron-on batting, which is quite handy. I have used that as well. Okay, irons. If you're just doing piecing alone and no raw edge fused applique, you can use your home standard iron. If you're going to be using applique with using the adhesive underneath, you should get an iron that you use exclusively for that, because this is what happens to your iron. This is a terrible, embarrassing example, but this is Vlisifix Wonder Under that's stuck to my iron. It's really hard to get off. Also, if you can get an iron that has no holes in the plate, that's really also good for applique, because generally I don't use steam with applique. You shouldn't really use steam with piecing because it distorts the fabric here as well. So a dry iron with a flat face on it is really good for most types of quilting. This here is a really inexpensive cheap iron, but they're really quite hard to come by with the no holes in the base. So if you can get one of those, it's definitely worth picking it up.